Following the revolution, the task at hand for the former colonies is creating a new nation, setting up a new government, deciding what the rules, what the blueprint of that government's going to be, and who's going to have power. Before we dive into creating that new nation and that new set of rules, a little side note first. Following the revolution and following the Treaty of Paris, after the revolution is officially over and the colonies have been granted their independence, General Washington retires from public service. His intention after the revolution and after his retirement is to return to his home and to live out his days as a private citizen, not in public service. Something worth mentioning because we know what happens to Washington down the road. Even before the Treaty of Paris is signed, the Second Continental Congress meets to start creating the new nation, to start creating the blueprint for how the nation's going to work. And the first blueprint they come up with is the Articles of Confederation. The one real successful accomplishment of the Articles of Confederation was the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. This ordinance was designed to determine what to do with land west of the Appalachians, land that had not really been settled by the colonists. They had been restricted from living west of the Appalachians while they were under British rule. Now they have all of this territory from the Appalachians to the Mississippi, and they have to decide how they're going to handle that territory. How are they going to admit those areas into the states? Will they be their own states? Will they be added on to already existing states? It's going to set the requirements for how these areas are going to become states. The major requirements for these areas becoming states was based on population. In order for these areas to gain their statehood, they had to have 60,000 free inhabitants living in the area. Then they were required to write a constitution, submit it to Congress, and request statehood. And this Northwest Territory would eventually become the states of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, the areas right around the Great Lakes. The Articles of Confederation ultimately failed. There were some major weaknesses in the Articles. The biggest was that the central government was simply too weak. Following the Revolution and following being ruled by Great Britain, the colonies didn't want to create a government, a central government that was too strong. They had already experienced that, and they didn't like it. What they ended up doing, though, was erring too much on the side of caution and creating a central government that was far too weak. Basically, what we ended up with the Articles of Confederation was 13 territories or states that acted pretty much independently. They were a very loose union of states. The central government had very little authority, very few powers. They could declare war, they could sign peace treaties, they ran the National Postal Service, and that was really the extent of their powers, of their ability. They had far too little control over the new nation. The states, on the other hand, were far too strong and too independent. They acted in their own interests. They did not act in the interest of this new nation. And ultimately, the Articles of Confederation will fail. That central government was too weak to exist, too weak to continue, and a new plan will be needed. Congress will meet again, and this time it's to form a new government to replace the Articles of Confederation. One of the big issues that they had to address was how each of the states was going to be represented. Under the Articles of Confederation, each state was granted one vote in Congress. This plan of one vote per state worked for the smaller states, but for the larger states with larger populations, they felt as though they were underrepresented. So with this new plan, we have two plans for representation brought to Congress. First, the Virginia Plan. This was presented by representatives from Virginia. Virginia, the largest state in population in the United States at this time. So their plan is going to promote more power for the larger states. They want representation based on population. The more people you have, the more representatives you get. New Jersey, on the other hand, is one of the smallest states in terms of population. So they want an equal distribution of power. They want each state to have the same amount of representatives. And this debate goes on for days. And eventually, The solution becomes known as the Great Compromise. Instead of choosing one of these plans, why not have both? The Great Compromise set up Congress as we have it today, with a Senate based on the New Jersey plan, where each state gets the same number of representatives. Each state, in this case, gets 2 representatives in the Senate. And the House of Representatives, based on the Virginia plan, where each state gets representatives based on their population. The more people you have, the more representatives you get. The other part of this new plan was a system of checks and balances. There was a real fear among the members of Congress and the citizens of the new United States of giving one person or one small group of people too much power. Again, we had already lived through that. With Britain, the king had absolute power, and Parliament even had far too much power. So we wanted to create a system where there was more of a balance of power. And to achieve that, we came up with 3 branches of government. The legislative branch, made up of the Senate and the House of Representatives. Their responsibility would be to make laws. The executive branch, the president, the vice president, and eventually the president's cabinet, it would be their responsibility to carry out laws. And the judicial branch, the Supreme Court and the rest of the court system, it would be their responsibility to enforce laws. Even these compromises didn't go without debates. After Congress signed the Constitution, it had to be ratified or approved by each of the states. This is where the debate really starts within the states, a debate between a group known as the Anti-Federalists and a group known as the Federalists. The Anti-Federalists were concerned that we were creating a central government that was too strong, too similar to what we had already experienced with Britain. The Federalists believed that we had a balanced system between the states and the central government, and they approved of the Constitution. This debate went on in the 13 states for different periods of time. Few states ratified the Constitution relatively quickly, but we're not going to have enough states ratify the Constitution until the Anti-Federalists are able to get one of their major demands. They were afraid that a strong central government couldn't protect the rights of the citizens within the new country, and that citizens and the states would be without enough power and without enough security. So they demanded a Bill of Rights to ensure rights to citizens and to states. And in our next set of notes, we'll be looking at that Bill of Rights and how it tried to protect citizens' rights.